Okay. Okay. I'm Sonali Day from University of Calcutta, India, and I would thank Rachel once more because of her I'm right now here. Actually, I worked with children throughout my career at different phases, and these phases are sometimes discrete. Like my PhD degree was on children, deprived children, and then I conducted a survey on street children, and then I worked as psychologist in a child guardians clinic for many years. And then I conduct research on children. Right now, I work more on transgender children. Okay, so there is a continuum, but I have been shifted from one to another. When I talked to Rachel regarding the topic, initially I thought that I'd discuss about qualitative methods, the application of qualitative methods for children, for abused children. But then Rachel, she asked me to talk about Indian scenario of child abuse, so I included that, and it became a bit longer. So I started to write down everything so that I don't go astray. And I'd like you to excuse me for my accent because my mother tongue is Bengali and we don't have any accent. The language is very flat, so we don't have accent. So I'll rather read because otherwise it will get longer. There are two parts of this one. Yeah, there are two parts of this. First is I'll talk about the different forms of child abuse in Indian context. Here I'll again make a correction that it's not exactly Indian context, it's more the context of West Bengal or Calcutta because I worked there. There is a similarity between Calcutta and the whole Indian context, but India is a diverse country. There are many different cultural groups and language groups, and it's a very diverse culture. So when I talk about a specific context, it doesn't, I cannot generalize it all over India. So that is one thing. Next, I'll come to qualitative methods. I'll start with a story. Rather than presenting figures and statistics, I'll go to stories. The stories will be, of course, very brief, not long stories. First, I will start with the story. I was then working in a clinic. A boy was brought to our clinic by his father. The child was showing signs of conduct disorder. His father, who had always accompanied the child, was anxious and full of complaints about his son's behavior. The boy was restless and anxious. It was probably their third or fourth visit. I was crossing the waiting area, heading towards my office, met his father there. He greeted me and showed his hand with a bandaged, broken finger and said, "See, ma'am, what he had done to me." I was surprised. Such a small boy broke his father's finger. But when they came to my room, the story got unfolded. The father tried to beat the child so hard that he himself broke his finger. And then he thinks that the boy has broken his finger. This is the disciplining father, who in his efforts to discipline the child, inflicting torture on him in the name of doing good. He was venting his frustration, anger, insecurity, as well as his patriarchal power on the child. Even the child from very concerned and protective families goes through abuse by the parents. Getting good grade in school is so important for the children that many remain unaware they are crossing the limits of when punishing the child for neglecting school lessons. In Indian homes, while preparing school lessons, children regularly get punished. They regularly get punishment, usually from the mother. And then when the father comes home, Usually mothers report it to the fathers, and the fathers tired and for the whole day's work, they vent all their, tiredness on the child. This is very usual. So we had been talking about sexual abuse all through, but I think these are also abuses that should be taken care of, that we should, focus on. Now I'll talk about a boy whose story can clearly show that abuses may not always leave a scar on the... scar on the body. Rather, it can occur from intention to provide protection and safety. I found this boy, 12, 13 years of age, extremely inhibited and timid. His mother and aunt accompanied him to the clinic. It turned out that his life was controlled in a manner so that any chances of harm from outside are absolutely blocked. He was not allowed to go out of house in the neighborhood alone. He was not allowed to cross the street. He was not allowed to go to shops. He was not allowed to go anywhere. He was absolutely restricted from any independent movement. His parents were apparently very caring, protective, concerned about the well-being of the child. But in the process, what they did, overprotection to such an extent made him captive and deterred his potential for growth. Parents' own insecurity got projected on the child. Overprotection is not an isolated affair, again, in our context. Rather, it is very common. Overprotection is very common. Every day the child is said, no, don't do this, no, don't do that. This no is very common in Indian families. Then I'll come to sexual abuse, though today we talked a lot about it. It's also a very frequent occurrence at home. One day a lady came with her daughter, with a very nice little small girl with her. She was regularly sexually abused by an uncle, her mother's fiancé, in the afternoon in her mother's absence. The widowed lady asked him to look after the child in the house in the hours of her absence at home. This is not the only story. There are many incidences of sexual abuse that take place in their own home. Just a few days back, one of my colleagues told that her small girl of 3 years old was sexually abused by his brother. The girl reported that she was having pain in her vagina, and when inquired, she mentioned his uncle, her uncle. So it just happened a few days back. Sexual abuses take place in their own home. Children get exposed to chances of sexual abuse when parents are absent from home for work or for other reasons, if for a short duration of time. Traditionally, in Indian culture, some very distant relatives often become part of the family, start living as extended family member. Even someone known to the family when come to the city for some purposes like education or medical treatment is accepted to stay in the household. Even the unrelated people who repeatedly visit for providing some services or to sell products become part of the family. And they get free access in the household. There are many cases I have seen like this. Many cases reported in the clinics show that children get sexually abused within the family by such extended family members or family acquaintances. Another source of vulnerability to sexual abuse for small children is by the people who run pick-up services for school children. For the poorer section of the society, children are more vulnerable. They are often sexually abused by shopkeepers, by some security staffs, by astray people on the streets, and such other. Children of all genders are subjected to such abuse. It's not only for the girl child, it's for both girls and boys. Apart from child sexual abuse that occurs at home or in the neighborhood by some persons known to the child or family, there are reports of child rape, when the child is raped and murdered, mutilated by single person or group of people. To combat child sexual abuse in India, a special law, POCSO, has been passed in 2012 and amended in 2018 so that the abuser gets strong punishment and the cases can be solved in a short duration and all that. These two newspaper clips are before the day I started for Israel. It came on the paper. A 3-year-old child, a girl child, she was the left hand one. She had been waiting in the station with her mother and a person, the mother is divorced. A person wanted to have relation with the mother. This person brought them together, mother and the child, to the station. When at night they were sleeping, when the mother woke up, she saw that the child was not in her side. The man was there. Then he called the police and all that. Then it was found that this person, along with two others, raped the child and they cut her head. And the body was recovered, the head was not yet when I came. And the other one is, the punishment using POCSO. Apart from such major acts of aggression and neglect, there are many micro violations. I remember many girl children who reported how they get a differential treatment at home compared to their brothers. It's very usual in many Indian families to send the boy child to a better school than to his sister, to allow him to go out for outdoor games. The boy child gets a bigger piece of fish, a better school bag, better shoes, and even better medical care when ill. They enjoy a higher status at home. However, gender bias is not the only form of micro-violation. I am highlighting it because in Indian society, social justice to the different genders is strongly linked to this. There are innumerable variations in micro-violation that are happening with children. You can get a new story every day. Abuses take so many forms, reducing it to few categories appear difficult. However, this is not the complete picture. This is majorly an urban, upper to middle class centric description because I worked with this segment. There is huge heterogeneity in Indian culture, strong class, caste, religion-based cultural differences are there. Accordingly, there could be many other narratives of child abuses. From here, I'll jump to straight to another section of society, the street children. The street children and children who live in homes for the destitute children. It's also majorly an urban-centric issue. The abuses are not just many more times extensive, but the picture that comes out is extremely painful. In India, a major chunk of the street children live with their families. Ministry of Welfare of Women and Child Development published a survey report in 2007 which shows that 65.9% street children live with their families. So it's not that they just live alone. There are also children who live by themselves, and many have remote contact with their family, like the family lives in the village and they live on the city streets. They usually earn their livelihood from street itself by doing small jobs like helping at tea stalls, roadside eateries, vegetable markets. Quite a few of them earn by begging or by doing small crimes too. The children who live alone or in groups means with their peers, are the most vulnerable ones, as they are the most easy prey for abuse and maltreatment. Most of these standalone children who are found on the streets are boys. Girls are very rarely seen. Now, but I'll share you the story about a girl here. A girl who lived on the street. Lakshmi was the name given to her by the traders of a small vegetable market. She used to lend her hand in their work in exchange of some food. She was about 14-15 years old when I saw her. And she lived alone on the street. From her behavior, it appeared that she had some psychiatric issues. To my shock, one day I found that she gave birth to a baby. I will never forget when I saw her with a newborn baby. The baby was lying on a small cloth of paper, a small sheet under the bare sky. And Lakshmi was roaming around. She was not attending to the child. She was just roaming. I felt that she doesn't know what to do. The baby was lying there, she was roaming around. And that was the last time I saw her. I hope some NGO or some people picked her up, but it happened. The neglect and abuse in the child of the street children, in the life of the street children, are sources of endless misery. Everyday life of a child on the street is full of deprivation and abuse. I met children at homes for destitute children. Usually these children do not have any family. Or ran away from their home because of torture by stepmother or by someone else, or mother is not there. These are children who do not have anyone who really cares for them, and they have nowhere to go. They looked clueless about their future. And even if they wanted to leave, they sometimes want to leave the home. They don't like to stay in the home, some of them, not all of them, but they do not have any place to go. When I asked them where you'd like to go, they were groping for answer. They don't know where they can go. They did not have any clear vision about their future and had uncertain feeling even towards own long left home. When I asked them, one boy, he told me that he remembers his home, but when I asked her details about her, he couldn't. And he doesn't know, what is the condition of his home right now. So, it gives a very, very strange picture that these young boys who could have bright future do not know that where they can go, what they can do. Lack of resources permeates every facet of children's life, from economic and material disadvantages through social and relational constraints and exclusions to the personal and more hidden aspects of poverty associated with shame, sadness, and the fear of difference and stigma. However, this is not a comprehensive account. There are incidences of child labor, which I haven't mentioned, because many a times they get corporal punishment. They are given very little, money in exchange of their work. The child who beg on the street, their family encourage them to beg on the street. The honor killings, when the child, usually the teenagers, when they get involved in a relation, they are killed by the family to keep the honor of the family. Killing of children for religious attainment. People think that if they can kill a child, if they do something, they sacrifice the life of a child, they can attain some religious something. There are many cases like that. And torture of the transgender child. They regularly get tortured at home. I remember a girl, she had been, she's a trans woman, not yet developed as a trans woman. She was a boy, it was a boy, and she felt like a girl. Her experience was like a girl, and slowly she was taking some hormones. Slowly changes were coming in her body, and when her family found out that they did mastectomy, because she was developing breast, so they did mastectomy. So and even rape is arranged by the family. So that the child's behavior can be changed, so that the transgender can become like a normal heterosexual person. So rape are arranged by the family many a times. And killing of the girl child is of course there, because girl children are burden to the family, the poor family. So killing of girl child is there. Now I'll move to the next section. I hope I'm in time. Okay. The use of qualitative methods. The greater power differential between adult researcher and therapist. I'm using the term researcher and therapist together because I feel the therapist is also a researcher, and the research has a therapeutic value on the children. It's not just research. The power differential between the therapist or the researcher and the child participant makes it a greater challenge for us as researcher, as therapist. As professional, we have to be careful not to impose our own views and expectations of childhood onto children. Preferable research assessment methods will be those that allow children to use their own words, concepts in relaxed settings. And the professional needs skills to gain access in the children's world. I'm trying to give an overview of the methods that I usually use for children. All of these methods involve conversational interview with some difference in settings to give the child comfortable space for expression. First is conversational interview. This is the primary method I use. I prepare an interview guide beforehand that provides the main axis around which the interview is conducted. but I conduct unstructured, open-ended interview. I talk to the child regarding various aspects, their life, their everyday life, their parents, their home, their significant others, their beliefs, wishes, and even different concepts which are quite abstract, like beauty, love, peace. I talk about all these issues. Most of the children like to talk once they get acquainted with me. A variant of this method is playroom interview. For smaller children who are quite inhibited, I use a playroom. First, I let them explore the playroom to make them comfortable. Some structured play materials are kept so that if they wish, they could play without any challenge to express their emotions. These structured materials include blocks, cars, and such other dolls, such others. After this, the child slowly proceeds to interact with other unstructured materials like clay, sand, water. And from there, slowly, I start conversation. And the conversational interview goes on. When playrooms are not available, and for children a little older, sometimes I use short movie clips. I show the child a part of the short film and ask her to proceed from there to continue the story, and I start my conversation based on that story. I also conduct group interview. I usually take a maximum of 4 children in a group, tell them the ground rules beforehand. Interestingly, contrary to our belief, the children participate better than the adult. Narrative interview I sometimes use. I ask the child to narrate the stories of his or her life. This is effective for older children and children who have good verbalization skill. For some children, it is effective, but for not all. Draw a family test I sometimes use when children do not talk about their family to lessen their inhibition, and from there I pick up the interview. I try to take a detailed account of the happenings in the lives of the participating children from some adult member, be it family or some home authority or some other caregiver, anyone. This is done in conjunction with interview at the end of the interview usually. The text generated through interviews of children are quite often than not characteristically fluid, fragmented in nature, unlike adult speeches, much less organized than adult speeches. But as the researcher therapist gets herself engaged with the meaning-making process, patterns start emerging. I effectively used these methods, but elsewhere it could be children in different culture. They may have different expectations, different rules guiding their behavior. So other methods could be more useful for them. Now, the question is why I have chosen qualitative research methods. Every methodology, as we know, have an underlying philosophy. So the philosophy of qualitative methodology, that made me interested in it. Methods are usually just the tools or weapons which we use. The underlying philosophy is the main thing. My choice of qualitative research methods is absolutely based on the underlying philosophy. Long time back, Henry Bergson in 1903 noted philosophers agree in making a deep distinction between 2 ways of knowing. First, going all around, and second, entering into it. Entering the phenomenon means complete presence with the participants during interaction or interview and sustained contact with the content afterwards. During the analysis of the content, during the analysis of the text that is being generated through the interview, during this process also, the researcher should have constant contact with the content. The researcher should be in a position to imagine the whole situation reading through the text. This ensures that we enter the world of the participating child and at the same time remain conscious of my own experience as a knower. We enter a phenomenon to discover what is significant from the viewpoint and actions of people who experience it. That is an interpretive rendering from inside. This requires few premises. First is non-hierarchy. The researcher or therapist and the child can get engaged in a relation based on equality. Second is non-normativity. Rules vary depending on cultural, subcultural, community, individual context. So if we act non-normative, there is less chance of putting our expectation on the child. So we have to be non-normative and non-hierarchical. Now focus on meaning. To appreciate what is happening in a setting, we need to know what it means to the child, not what it means to myself as a researcher, but what is the meaning to the child. Interpretive, there is no viewpoint that is independent of interpretation. In the world, there is no concept, no viewpoint that is independent of interpretation. So every viewpoint bears interpretation of the observer. Thus we can discard the generalized expectations very easily. And next is discovery, not proof. An open mind is essential so that we do not see phenomenon only through the existing frame of any theory. The intention is to find the ground reality than looking for proof of the existing theory. So entering a phenomenon implies immersing into it. And we as researcher therapists often go through experiences that are difficult to comprehend with existing knowledge or that do not fit our knowledge. However, researchers seldom report or disclose personal bewilderment while trying to make out meaning of a phenomenon. Ambiguity, bewilderment, and contradictions are rather signs that we are entering the phenomenon and might be sensing the hidden meaning of it. Significant meanings are often tacit, liminal, unstated, and unacknowledged. To understand participants, meaning we need to be self-reflective so that we can bracket and hold our own internalized view and rationality, and rather flow with the experience of the child's world we study. So, to adopt qualitative methods, we need to remember the following. First is reflexivity, how the research therapy process transforms our own self, our knowledge, structure, our faith, belief, our rationality. Today in the morning, in the sessions, we have seen this. We have already seen this. When an incident changed the life goal or the pattern of someone who presented here in the morning. The therapist researcher is not a neutral therapy provider who remains unaffected and aloof, providing robotic assistance to the child. Next is meaning making is a process that requires co-construction. Arriving at the meaning of the phenomenon through joint effort on the part of the child and the researcher therapy is required. The researcher sometimes feels it's his or her responsibility to find out the meaning, but it's a joint responsibility of the child and the therapist. It legitimizes the participant's right over the findings, even if she is a child. Third is truth or reality. It could be multiple and contextual. It is relative depending on our standpoint. Chalmers noted, truth emerging from one standpoint becomes rhetoric when viewed from compelling evidence flowing from another standpoint. Reality can be redefined with change of standpoint, change of context. Reality is always subjective. Subjective interpretation of an event constitutes the reality for the individual. Theories claiming universal application believe in universal generalized reality that may not fit the local context. The way we frame our query research shape what we are looking for and what we can see. Chalmers suggested, following Goffman, that we may make the list of our objectives as lengthy as possible. As open research questions keeps the possibilities open, we need to keep ourselves open to experience. Goffman suggested intimate familiarity with the phenomena. Herbert Blumer asserted that we need intimate familiarity to say anything important about our participants. While observations Observation remained one of the frequently used methods. The way Goffman suggested its essence shows the meaning of intimate familiarity to him. I'm quoting him, subjecting yourself, your own body, your own personality, and your own social situation to the set of contingencies that play upon a set of individuals, so that you can physically penetrate the circle of responses to their social situation or their, I'll finish, this is the last slide, or their work situation or their ethnic situation or whatever. Language is the vehicle through which all views, values, feelings, priorities are expressed. There is no other possible tool to reach the child's world. Of course, drawing is also a language. It's not that the language means that's the verbal language, drawing is also a language. Without active participation of the human participant, the child, no phenomenon can be understood. Lack of rigid and fixed framework paves the path for imaginative and reflexive handling. So it's better not to make a very strict design or to make it very, strict rules. Thick description is required for understanding a phenomenon. Gestural viewpoints make phenomena appear similar, flattening small but significant particularities. And lastly, care for the participant and children. The participating children are more important than quest for objective knowledge generation. Chalmers avowed that respect for research participants as persons supersedes research objectives. Respect involves accepting and honoring their fundamental humanity, understanding their actions as they see them, not according to our own perspective. So flowing with the experience of the child is the main thing that should be done, and the care of the child should be our main concern, not just, finding out, having findings at knowledge, generating knowledge. Thank you.